It's my kind of filth. I love it. Joining me now in studio to discuss the new season of Dirty Jobs.
Well, there have been many that I've said, no, I'd rather not do that, but my only job on that show is to try, right? So if I did anything smart in this whole crazy...
Just moments ago, breaking alerts flashed across television screens and social media feeds. Mike Rowe, the man who made America fall in love with hard work, has just made an announcement that no one saw coming. For 2 decades, Mike has been the voice and face of honesty, grit, and common sense, guiding audiences through the dirtiest jobs and the hardest truths. But today, the story is not about coal miners or sewer inspectors, it's about Mike himself. At 62 years old, Rowe stands at a crossroads, facing headlines that have stunned both fans and critics alike. The man who has always celebrated the backbone of America is suddenly caught in the spotlight of a deeply personal revelation. What he just admitted, barely a minute ago, has the potential to reshape how we view not only his career, but the very mission he has fought for his entire life. To understand the breaking news surrounding Mike Rowe today, you have to travel back to Baltimore, Maryland, where his story began. Long before the world knew him as the rugged host of Dirty Jobs, Mike was simply a kid with a love for storytelling and performance. He wasn't born into television. In fact, his earliest passions were worlds away from crawling through sewers or climbing into oil rigs. As a boy, he was heavily involved in theater, speech, and music, where his natural charisma and deep baritone voice first took shape. Mike often credits his grandfather, a skilled tradesman, as his greatest inspiration. His grandfather was a man who could build or fix just about anything, and young Mike admired not only his work ethic, but also his quiet dignity. While many children dreamed of superheroes or movie stars, Mike saw his grandfather as the ultimate role model. That respect for hands-on labor, planted in his childhood, would later become the driving force behind his career. But Mike's path to fame was anything but traditional. After graduating from Towson University with a degree in communication studies, he pursued voice work and performance. Few people know that before he ever set foot on the sets of Dirty Jobs, Mike was a trained opera singer. He performed with the Baltimore Opera, using his rich voice in a way that seemed destined for music halls rather than muddy trenches. Yet, despite his success in the arts, he felt drawn to something more, something that allowed him to connect with ordinary people in extraordinary ways. His career in television began with commercial work and narration. Soon, his deep voice was everywhere, advertising products, narrating documentaries, and lending authority to countless programs. That booming, trustworthy sound became his signature. But the true turning point came when Mike landed a hosting job on QVC, the home shopping network. While the role may not have seemed glamorous, it honed his quick wit and ability to improvise. Selling random gadgets to insomniac shoppers taught him the art of engaging an audience, no matter the subject. From there, Mike built a resume that included travel programs, narration gigs, and hosting opportunities. But behind the polished delivery and on-camera charm, he remained deeply connected to his Baltimore roots, his respect for laborers, and his desire to tell stories that mattered. It was this authenticity that would eventually capture the attention of Discovery Channel producers, who were searching for someone to host a show unlike anything else on television. A show about the dirtiest, most dangerous, and most overlooked jobs in America. Mike didn't just fit the mold, he broke it. Unlike many TV personalities, he didn't approach these workers as a detached observer. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and joined them side by side in their grueling tasks. Whether it was castrating lambs, diving into sewage pipes, or cleaning shark tanks, Mike embraced the grit with humor, humility, and genuine curiosity. By the early 2000s, Dirty Jobs wasn't just a quirky documentary series, It was a cultural phenomenon. And at the heart of it all was Mike Rowe, the Baltimore kid who grew up to become the storyteller of America's labor force. It's this journey, from opera halls to oil rigs, from QVC to the muddy backroads of America, that makes today's headline so impactful. Mike has always been more than just a TV host. He's been a bridge between the world of entertainment and the world of real work. And as his story takes a shocking turn today, fans can't help but look back at where it all began. In Baltimore, with a boy who dreamed big but never forgot the value of hard work. When Dirty Jobs premiered in 2003, no one could have predicted that it would become one of the most important shows of its time. On paper, the concept sounded simple. A host would travel the country, stepping into the dirtiest, toughest, and most overlooked professions in America. But when Mike Rowe became that host, something extraordinary happened. He didn't just stand back and narrate, he dove headfirst into every task, getting covered in mud, grime, sweat, and worse. Viewers were instantly captivated, not just by the shocking jobs themselves, but by Mike's willingness to do them with humor, humility, and respect for the people who lived that life every day. From the very first episode, it was clear this was not a show about laughs at someone else's expense. Instead, it was about shining a spotlight on unsung heroes, the sewer inspectors, pig farmers, coal miners, garbage collectors, and crab fishermen who kept society running but rarely received recognition. By stepping into their world, Mike turned them into the stars of the show. He gave them dignity in a way no television program had ever done before. For 8 seasons, Mike took audiences on a journey across America that was both educational and emotional. He exposed people to the reality of dangerous, back-breaking work, while also reminding them of its value. These weren't just dirty jobs. They were necessary jobs, and without them, the country would grind to a halt. In an era where glossy celebrity culture dominated television, Dirty Jobs was a breath of fresh air. It showed authenticity, grit, and humanity in its rawest form. The workers Mike met weren't actors. They were fathers, mothers, and neighbors, and their stories resonated with millions. But what made the show unforgettable was Mike himself. His quick wit turned even the most revolting tasks into moments of levity. His narration transformed grotesque imagery into poetic storytelling. And his genuine curiosity made viewers feel like they were learning alongside him. Behind the dirt and danger, Mike always asked the bigger questions. Who does this job? Why does it matter? And what happens if nobody is willing to do it anymore? These weren't just throwaway thoughts. They were the heartbeat of the series. They tapped into a growing cultural concern: America's disappearing workforce in skilled trades. The show became a rallying cry for valuing hard work, and Mike became its face and voice. Dirty Jobs was more than entertainment. It was social commentary. It reminded people that the nation was built on sweat, calloused hands, and unglamorous labor. Ratings soared, and the show became one of Discovery Channel's most successful programs, spawning specials, spin-offs, and endless reruns. To this day, reruns of Dirty Jobs continue to inspire younger audiences who missed its original run, proving its message is timeless. Mike Rowe didn't just host a TV show, he created a cultural movement. That is why today's breaking headline feels so monumental. Because when Mike Rowe makes news, it's never just about him. It's about the millions who saw their own struggles reflected in his journey through America's dirtiest jobs. When the cameras stopped rolling on Dirty Jobs, many assumed Mike Rowe would quietly fade into television history. Remembered fondly for his time crawling through sewers and standing knee-deep in sludge. But Mike wasn't done. In many ways, Dirty Jobs had only been the beginning. What he witnessed across America, the shortage of skilled laborers, the pride of those who worked with their hands, and the widening gap between education and real-world needs ignited a fire in him. He realized he couldn't simply walk away. He had a mission, and it was far bigger than television ratings. In 2008, Mike launched the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, an organization devoted to promoting skilled trades and funding scholarships for those who wanted to pursue them. At a time when high schools pushed college as the only path to success, Mike stood up and said what few were willing to admit. America desperately needed welders, electricians, plumbers, mechanics, and carpenters just as much as it needed lawyers, doctors, or CEOs. He argued that dignity was not found in the letters after your name, but in the effort you put into your work. For Mike, this wasn't a talking point. It was a call to action. Through the foundation, millions of dollars have been distributed in scholarships, giving countless young people opportunities to enter careers that society often overlooked. Mike used his platform to highlight stories of those who chose the trades, showing how they built fulfilling lives without the crushing debt of a 4-year degree. He appeared before Congress, spoke at universities, and wrote op-eds that challenged the educational status quo. His message was always the same: real work matters, and without people willing to do it, society cannot survive. Beyond scholarships, Mike took his advocacy into storytelling again, this time through his popular Facebook series, Returning the Favor, where he traveled across the country shining a spotlight on ordinary people doing extraordinary things in their communities. The show, like Dirty Jobs, was filled with humor and humility, but it also carried a deep sense of gratitude for everyday heroes. It became another hit, drawing millions of views and cementing Mike's reputation not just as a TV personality, but as a moral voice for hard-working Americans. He also embraced the digital age, launching his The Way I Heard It podcast, a modern-day version of Paul Harvey's famous radio stories. Short, sharp, and packed with unexpected twists, these stories connected him to millions of listeners who valued his ability to find meaning in the overlooked corners of history and everyday life. Yet, despite his growing influence in multiple arenas, Mike never lost his grounding. He resisted being boxed into politics, refusing to align himself with one party or ideology. Instead, he championed what he called common-sense solutions, often criticizing both sides of the political spectrum when they ignored the workers who kept the country running. His willingness to speak plainly, without fear of offending, made him a refreshing voice in a world dominated by spin. All of this explains why today's news carries so much weight. Because Mike Rowe is not just a television host, he's an advocate, a teacher, a storyteller, and, in the eyes of millions, a modern-day philosopher for working America. Every headline about him echoes far beyond Hollywood or cable networks. It reverberates in classrooms, workshops, farms, and factories across the nation. As the years went by, Mike Rowe's role in American culture shifted. He was no longer just the guy from Dirty Jobs. He had become something more, an unlikely philosopher, a voice of reason in an increasingly divided nation. While politicians bickered and media outlets shouted across ideological lines, Mike carved out a space where honesty, humility, and common sense still mattered. He did this not through speeches filled with jargon, but through simple, relatable stories. His Facebook posts became legendary, shared by millions for their wit, clarity, and ability to cut through the noise. He would take everyday experiences, fixing a broken toilet, observing a bird's nest, remembering a lesson from his grandfather, and turn them into reflections on the bigger questions: work, responsibility, gratitude, and the meaning of success. Unlike the endless talking heads that filled cable news, Mike spoke like a neighbor over the fence. His style wasn't about inflaming anger or stoking division. It was about reminding people of shared values that had quietly eroded in modern life. He urged people to look past labels, to see the humanity in one another, and to never forget the dignity of work. For many, he became the antidote to the chaos of political discourse. Yet his refusal to fully align with any party or agenda also made him a target. Some accused him of being too conservative when he spoke about personal responsibility. Others accused him of being too liberal when he criticized corporations for neglecting workers. But Mike rarely wavered. He insisted that common sense had no party affiliation, and he refused to let pundits force him into a corner. His podcast, The Way I Heard It, further cemented this reputation. In every episode, he unpacked short but powerful stories filled with twists and lessons that always left listeners reflecting long after the credits rolled. It wasn't politics, it was humanity, told in a way that cut across ideology and background. The same deep voice that once narrated crab fishermen braving icy waters was now guiding audiences through the storms of modern society. Mike's ability to bridge divides became even more crucial during times of national crisis. When unemployment soared, when industries collapsed, when the pandemic reshaped how America worked, Mike was there, reminding everyone that the workers on the front lines, the truckers, the nurses, the electricians, the farmers, were the true backbone of the country. His posts and interviews during those years carried weight because they were grounded in authenticity, not ambition. People trusted him not because he was famous, but because he had earned that trust crawling through sewers, hauling garbage, and slaughtering pigs alongside real workers. That credibility made him unique, and it is why every word he speaks today reverberates far beyond the television industry. He became a figure not of glamour or celebrity, but of trust. And in a time when trust in institutions, media, and leadership has eroded to dangerous levels, Mike Rowe emerged as a rare voice people still believed in, which is exactly why the announcement he made just minutes ago has hit so hard. Because when Mike Rowe speaks, America listens, not out of obligation, but because they know he has always told the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. For all his success and influence, Mike Rowe's life has not been without challenges. In fact, behind the calm voice of reason that fans admire, there have been whispers of struggles, setbacks, and surprising twists that shaped the man we see today. Fame may have given him a platform, but it also placed him under constant scrutiny. Every word, every opinion, and every personal choice has been dissected by critics eager to find cracks in his reputation. Mike has always carried himself with humility, but even he has admitted that the weight of expectations can be exhausting. There were rumors over the years about his health, questions about whether the demanding work of dirty jobs and his countless other projects had taken a toll on him physically. Crawling through toxic sewers, handling dangerous machinery, and exposing himself to hazardous conditions for the sake of television entertainment wasn't without consequences. He has spoken openly about lingering aches, back pain, and the exhaustion that followed after long days of filming. Yet he rarely complained, choosing instead to highlight the far greater physical burdens carried by the workers he shadowed. Beyond the physical toll, Mike also faced the invisible strain of public life. His blunt honesty, which so many admired, occasionally sparked controversy. A single post on Facebook could ignite firestorms, with people on both sides twisting his words to fit their own agendas. For a man who prided himself on standing outside of politics, it was frustrating to see his message dragged into partisan battles. And then there were the financial challenges. While many assumed that a successful television career meant endless wealth, Mike often reminded people that his fortune was not nearly as vast as tabloids claimed. He poured much of his earnings into his foundation and advocacy work, sometimes at personal cost. Unlike celebrities who built empires off endorsements, Mike often turned down opportunities that felt inauthentic to his mission. His reputation mattered more than money, but that integrity sometimes came with sacrifice. There were also personal struggles he rarely spoke about. His decision to live a more private life, avoiding marriage and children, raised questions in interviews and gossip columns. Mike, always quick with humor, often deflected, saying he was too busy or that his work had become his family. But close friends revealed that the solitude, while chosen, sometimes weighed on him. It wasn't loneliness, exactly, but a sense of isolation that came from carrying so much responsibility on his own shoulders. Yet for every rumor of hardship, Mike seemed to find ways to surprise people. Just when fans thought he might step back from the spotlight, he returned with a new project, a fresh perspective, or an unexpected story. Whether launching Returning the Favor, expanding his foundation, or taking his podcast to new heights, Mike constantly reinvented himself. He became proof that resilience was not just something he admired in others, but something he lived himself. And this is why the news breaking today feels so heavy. Because while the world has long speculated about the struggles Mike Rowe carried in private, he has now admitted something publicly that few expected. A truth that explains years of rumors, clarifies whispers about his future, and sets the stage for what could be the most dramatic chapter of his career. And then it happened. Just minutes ago, Mike Rowe stepped forward with an announcement that stunned fans, rattled colleagues, and sent shockwaves across the industry. In a carefully worded but emotional statement, he revealed that he would be stepping away from much of his public work to confront challenges that could no longer remain hidden. For years, speculation had circled about his health, his future, and the toll his relentless schedule had taken. Today, Mike confirmed what many feared but few dared to say. The grind of decades spent in hazardous environments and under constant stress has caught up with him. Though he did not go into every detail, Mike admitted that doctors had strongly advised him to slow down, to prioritize his well-being over his relentless mission. For a man who spent his life climbing through coal dust and sewage with a smile, it was a gut punch to hear him admit vulnerability. But it was not just about health. Mike also acknowledged the emotional toll of carrying the weight of advocacy alone for so long. He spoke about the pressure of being expected to always provide wisdom, to always be the voice of reason in an increasingly unreasonable world. He admitted that he had often felt like he was shouting into the void, trying to remind the country of its backbone while watching institutions continue to ignore the skilled workers he fought so hard to honor. And in a moment that silenced millions of fans, he revealed that the future of his beloved foundation, Mike Rowe Works, would be changing. While it would not disappear, he explained that leadership would be passed on to others, allowing him to step back and focus on his personal life. For an organization that had funded countless scholarships and reshaped the conversation about work in America, this transition marked the end of an era. The announcement wasn't framed as a farewell, but rather as an inevitable shift. Mike promised that his voice would still be heard, perhaps through his podcast, through occasional projects, or in smaller doses. But he was honest. He could not continue at the same pace, in the same way, without sacrificing his health and his future. It was bittersweet, both an admission of limitation and a declaration of self-preservation. Fans were left stunned. Many had seen Mike as indestructible, a man immune to the pressures of fame and the dangers of labor. To hear him confess that he too was human, fragile, and in need of rest was shocking in its honesty. And yet, in true Mike Rowe fashion, he ended with humor. He reminded people that he had always said dirty jobs was a love letter to work, not to him. The jobs would go on, the workers would endure, and America's backbone would not collapse simply because one man stepped back. But even with that humor, the reality was clear. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter for Mike Rowe, one where he finally put himself first. The reaction to Mike Rowe's announcement was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes of his statement, social media platforms lit up with an outpouring of emotion. Fans who had followed him since the earliest days of Dirty Jobs expressed heartbreak, gratitude, and disbelief. For many, Mike had been more than a television host. He had been a mentor from afar, a voice that gave dignity to their own struggles. Truck drivers wrote about listening to his podcast on long hauls and how his words kept them company through lonely nights. Electricians, welders, farmers, and mechanics shared memories of watching Dirty Jobs with their children and explaining, with pride, "That's what Dad does." For them, Mike wasn't just on TV, he was proof that their work mattered. Former Dirty Jobs crew members and workers who once appeared on the show also chimed in, posting old photos, recounting behind-the-scenes stories, and thanking Mike for putting their work on the map. One crab fisherman from Alaska wrote, "Without Mike, nobody would have ever understood what we go through out here. He made America care, and I'll never forget it." The industry itself was equally shaken. Television executives who once doubted that a show about sewage pipes and garbage men could succeed admitted that Mike had forever changed the rules of storytelling. His unique blend of humor, humility, and authenticity had become a gold standard, something almost impossible to replicate. Producers spoke about how Mike's exit marked the end of an era in reality television, one where real work, not staged drama, captivated audiences. Scholars and labor advocates also weighed in, noting the cultural void his absence would leave. Mike Rowe wasn't just a TV host, one columnist wrote. He was America's blue-collar philosopher. His voice carried more weight than most politicians, and people trusted him in ways they no longer trust leaders. But not all reactions were sentimental. Some critics suggested his departure highlighted a deeper problem: the nation's ongoing neglect of skilled trades. If Mike Rowe can't keep this fight going, one commentator wrote, then maybe the rest of us need to wake up and take his place. The skills gap isn't going away, and losing his voice makes it worse. The financial world even took notice. Companies that had partnered with Mike through advocacy campaigns scrambled to figure out what his reduced presence might mean for their own outreach. Foundations that had relied on his star power to raise awareness for scholarships and workforce training faced new uncertainty. Meanwhile, everyday Americans continued to flood his platforms with support. Messages of encouragement poured in. "Take care of yourself, Mike. You've taken care of us long enough. We'll carry the torch. You've already lit the way." Even celebrities joined in, with actors, musicians, and fellow hosts praising him as one of the most authentic figures to ever appear on television. For a man who had spent his career lifting up others, seeing millions now rush to lift him up was both poetic and fitting. And yet, beneath the gratitude and praise, one question loomed. What comes next? As the dust settles from today's shocking announcement, one truth remains undeniable. Mike Rowe has already secured his place in American history. His legacy is not confined to a television series or a foundation. It lives in the millions of lives he touched, the countless workers he dignified, and the conversations he sparked about the value of real labor. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, Mike's voice will still echo in classrooms where teachers show clips of dirty jobs to remind students that every career has worth. It will echo in workshops where apprentices pick up tools, inspired by scholarships that carry his name. It will echo in homes where families remember gathering around the TV to watch him crawl through filth with a smile, proving that laughter and respect can coexist even in the dirtiest corners of society. His departure from the forefront does not signal an end, but a passing of the torch. For years, Mike carried the burden of being the sole mainstream advocate for America's skilled trades. Now, his absence challenges others, educators, lawmakers, parents, and workers themselves, to step up and continue the fight he started. In many ways, this might be his greatest contribution, forcing the nation to realize that one man cannot shoulder this mission alone. Yet, even as he steps back, Mike has promised he will not disappear. His podcast will likely continue, his occasional reflections will still surface, and his humor will no doubt find its way into the public square. But the frenzy, the constant demands, the endless pressure, those days are behind him. And perhaps that is the final lesson Mike Rowe offers, that even the strongest among us must know when to rest, when to listen to their own body, and when to trust that their work has been enough. Fans may mourn the loss of his daily presence, but they will carry his message forward because it has already become part of them. He showed the nation that dirty jobs are not shameful, that hard work is not obsolete, and that dignity is found not in glamour, but in grit. For decades, he shined a light on America's hidden workforce, and in doing so, he became one of the most trusted figures of his generation. Now, as he steps into a quieter chapter, the legacy of Mike Rowe endures, a legacy of honesty, humor, resilience, and above all, respect for the people who keep the world turning, one dirty job at a time.